Hey guys, and welcome to Functional Print Friday, and welcome back to my shop. So you joined me already in progress this week. This is a temporary piece that I designed and whipped up to get something going again very urgently. In fact, I actually measured, drew, and had this piece printed out in less than an hour. I think it was close to about 40 minutes. That's including the printing and everything. So let me show you what this piece is for, because this is not a long-term solution. It just got us going right away, and we need to come up with a better solution. So let me show you what this fits. All right, so here is what we're looking at today. This is the timer control for our dryer, and this is where this really quick design fits on here. And it's a little bit of a loose fit, but it gets the job done. You can grab it like this and turn it, and it sort of has this pointed feature that shows you what you've got selected. The flat face here of the control points to what is actively selected on the timer. And I don't want to pull this all off again, because honestly I don't know that it'll hold up to me taking it off and putting it back on again. This thing is made so cheaply. It is a shame how appliances are made today. And this is a GE as well. I don't think there is even a good brand of appliance anymore, but this was extremely cheaply made, the original knob. It was really, really thin plastic with a thin piece of metal pressed into it that fit over this piece, and it had slowly just started working itself up, and it got pushed back down a couple times, but it just kept getting looser and looser, and eventually the knob itself, the inside of it, broke. The other thing that happened here is, and you notice there is a self-tapping screw. The timer control behind this is just a small rectangular module with two metal like almost flanges that come over and attached to two plastic posts inside of here. The plastic posts are super thin, and the sheet metal tabs that come off of the timer is so thin that a toddler could bend it. Again, it's just cost cutting to the max. It's really frustrating. But I fixed that with just a solid spacer and a self-tapping screw that goes down through that metal. There potentially is a more aesthetically pleasing way to fix it, but honestly I think this is going to be the strongest way to fix it, and yeah, I'm just going to live with that. All right, so this one does fit on here reasonably well, and that's great because we can reuse a whole bunch of the geometry from this in our final design. Like, I know the overall shape of this with the flat, the outside diameter of this, and the depth of that do work pretty well. So we'll steal that, but I'd like this to be an actual knob, something that is easier to grab. Like this one, it's actually pretty easy to grab, but it puts a lot of undue force on this because you're not turning from the center. It's kind of pulling that timer module underneath sideways when you're turning here. So I want it to be something that we can grab evenly. And I don't think it's going to be too hard to beat the design of the stock knobs. These are actually pretty hard to grab, and it takes a fair amount of force to turn this guy. So, all right, I'm going to go whip something up that looks more like a knob, and I will bring you guys back. All right, guys, and here is my design space so far for this dryer knob. And you can see I started by just importing the geometry that I had from that just sort of temporary one that I had made up to get the dryer back up and running. And from there, I measured how much room we have to work with, like what the overall diameter of the knob can be. And we have about 72 millimeters of space to work with before we start going over the markings where the knob's going to go. And then I just started to think about how many points I wanted on the knob. And there's no like perfect formula for this. I'll often just sort of think about how big the knob is going to be and maybe even sketch it like literally just on a piece of paper and see how my fingers line up to it. I thought 7 was good for this, and that's ultimately what I went with. 5 probably would have been fine. 8 probably would have been fine. I don't know that I'd go with more than that because then they just end up being too small to grip. But it really is going to vary based on the size of the knob that you're designing. At this point, I'd kind of refined that a bit, extruded it down, and it still didn't look right to me. It looked like it just needed some taper at the top, and that's what I've done here to what is going to be our first test piece. I haven't printed this one out yet. I'm not going to bother with this one. We are going to print this one out. I'm not sure how I want the pointer for this to be. We're going to end up doing this in 2 different colors once we have a final design. So the part that you see is sort of our line and arrow is going to be a contrasting color to the rest of the knob. Probably do the knob in black and then do white or gray for the actual pointer on the knob. But yeah, I shrunk the top of it so that we have a nice taper to it. It's really, I don't want to go any further at this point. You can go really far, you can end up going really far in your design software without actually printing something out and then just testing it, holding it in your hand. There's a lot of things that look great on the screen that when you print them out, immediately it's obvious that it's just not going to work. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to print this one out, and we're going to see just aesthetically how it looks, how it feels in the hand, and whether it actually does fit over that D shaft on the timer. So, all right, I'm going to print this one out, and I'll bring you guys back. All right, and our test piece is completed, and the supports worked out pretty well. That came off fairly smoothly. I did have to get some of it off with a needle nose pliers just at the edge, and I feel I've left a little bit there, but I don't think that is going to stop us from testing it. It already feels pretty good. If anything, it doesn't need to be this tall. I've got fairly large hands, and even like thumb and forefinger on here, you can see where I'm putting pressure on it. There's probably an easy 10 millimeters up here that we just don't really need. So already thinking about shrinking it down a little bit further this way. And I'm not sure I like the big fat line across the top. Or I should say, I'm not sure I like it all the way across the top. It looked good in CAD, but seeing it in person, it just, I don't know. I'm thinking maybe we should have stopped at the middle or something. It's obviously going to look different when we print that in a contrasting color as well. But let's go see if this fits. I just realized right now in my haste, I didn't actually line up the flat on this geometry that I reused with where the pointer points to. So it's going to look a little bit silly, but we can still sort of get an overall feel for it. Yeah, it's not bad. Oh, it's easy, way easy to turn. I do think it's a little bit tall. It almost feels like it's kind of getting in the way of gripping it when you're like kind of gripping it across your palm like that. So we'll definitely shorten the height a little bit. And I think we could probably come down a bit as well. I think we have more distance from this face down here to this face than we need. I'll measure that and check that with some feeler gauges. Maybe, yeah, you know what? It is closer at the bottom than it is at the top. So maybe we'll leave that alone. And we definitely need a contrasting color there to see where this guy is pointing. All right, and here is the updated design for this. And Mrs. FPF suggested doing the knob in white and doing the marking in black. So I colored it that way in here, and already that looks pretty good. I did shorten up that line that ran all the way across the top, and I curved it in the center to make it seem as if it's sort of pivoting on that. So as you turn the knob, it'll almost look like this part, I think, stays stationary. I also added a recess up here to the top, purely aesthetic, but I think that is just going to kind of set the top off a little bit and just add a little bit more contrast and shadow lines up here when you're looking at the finished part. So, all right, I'm going to get this printed out, and let's see how it looks and see how it fits. All right, and our updated test piece is complete, and I am really happy with how this came out. Kudos to Mrs. FPF for suggesting that we do this in white with black for the marking. I don't know why I was planning on doing this in black with white for the marking. I think white's going to look way better on the machine. And taking the 5 millimeters off, it's funny, it doesn't look that different holding them side by side, but the proportion just looks right. This one looks really, really over tall now, and this one looks just right. Meanwhile, there's only 5 millimeters in difference between them. But let's see how it fits. All right, it's actually the next day. The original temporary one was back on here because we did actually need to use the dryer, but let's swap it out for this one. Oh, wow. That honestly looks pretty good on there. Yeah, Mrs. FPF was definitely right about switching to white for this. And I like that pointer now. Even when you're blocking it, so when you're blocking it with your hand, you still have an idea where it's pointing because you have it visible up here. And then as you get close, that arrow, yeah, that's nice. I like that. You know, I think it's still a little bit loose. I think we could still tighten that up a little bit. The other thing I was thinking about is I know on some dryers you either like push this knob or pull it to start it. So if someone was to pull this, it's going to pull straight off. And I'm not so much worried about that because we can put it back on. I'm worried about the scenario where maybe somebody pulls it and it doesn't go all the way back down, so we don't have full contact for this flat inside of here to this guy. So I'm thinking it might be worthwhile to put a set screw on this. Yeah, so imagine, see, our flat is on this side. Our flat lines up with where this arrow points to. So imagine if we were to add a bore on this side that maybe went in at like an angle and hit the back part of this. That would kind of serve two purposes. It would force the flat in here against this flat in case this guy ever loosens up, and it would also stop this from being lifted off. Let's see if we can do that. All right, guys, this ended up being a bit trickier than I anticipated to get this bore in here for the set screw. I thought we had more room to work with, and the reality is we just don't. I thought that D shaft that comes out of the timer went deeper into the geometry of the knob, but the reality is it's actually about 1 millimeter shorter than the face that represents the bottom of the bore here in the knob for that shaft to go into. And it's actually rounded over slightly at the end. So we're biting on, pretty much right at the end of it. I mean, it's not the very end of it. The shaft is going to come. There should be full width material on the shaft up to probably about right there where the end of the pointer is. So we should get a good bite on it. But yeah, you can see the angle I had to drop this guy in. We are just below this face on the knob. There's probably only about 0.7 millimeters where it is closest, like right here for that bore. Yeah, I think you can kind of see that there through the translucent part of the knob. So I think it's going to work. I guess we won't know for sure until we try it, but that was a good bit of trial and error to figure out what angle that was going to drop in there at and work for both the face out here where we need to insert the set screw and where it drops into the bore for that shaft. And by the way, I have a whole little kit of set screws, and I'll link that down in the description of this video. I can't stress enough how nice it is to have like kits of all the little screws and set screws and things like that you typically use in designs rather than having to order and wait for them to show up. It's even nice, I often find myself just going and grabbing those kits just so I can hold the part that I'm thinking about using in my hand. Oftentimes I might be thinking, oh, this is going to be an M4 screw, or I'll size this for an M5, M3, whatever. But being able to grab it out and hold it in my hand, I'll often realize, like, nah, that's too big or that's too small, and I'll go up or down a size, and then I can just measure right off the fasteners when I'm designing. So I'll link to the set screw kit that I have and am using for this design down in the description of this video. So, all right, let's get this printed out and see if it works. All right, our updated test piece is done, and it looks like the hole for the set screw came out pretty clean, and I don't think it stands out too much there on the side. If I'm nitpicking, I'll admit here that I can see what looks like a little bit of black filament that must have maybe wiped off the nozzle a couple layers down. There might be a little spot of it there too. I'm going to try and resist the urge to reprint this because I know after today I'm never going to see that again, but I'll admit it is bothering me right now. All right, let me go find the right size set screw for this. I think this is a 2 millimeter hex. Yep. Seems to be starting in there pretty good. You got to be careful with stuff like this. It's really tempting to go grab the drill and a 2 millimeter hex bit and just drive this guy right through. The problem is that's probably going to create enough friction to warm up the set screw and potentially melt the PLA, which means we might not get clean thread. So I'm going to take my time and I'm going to drive this guy all the way through at sort of that pace with the T-handle wrench. All right, I can see it just starting to poke through there, and it's interesting. There's only about 1 millimeter of material here on this bottom face to where that bore is, and you can actually see it through there. The white PLA is translucent enough that we can see the set screws, or sort of at least the darker color underneath there. So I'm going to back this off just a little bit now that I know that we are pretty much there. I want to make sure that the bore here that goes down over our timer is clear, and we'll tighten this up after we put it on. All right, let's go do it. All right, I've got you guys in the tripod because I need both hands. Let's see. I did tighten up the bore on this one as well a little bit. I keep changing it by tiny increments because I don't want to go too tight where we're actually like forcing that timer module back. Oh, that is, I think that's right there. It still slides pretty freely, like 2/3 of the way down, and the last third it really snugs up. Let's try the set screw. So I'm going to turn until I'm starting to feel resistance. I don't want to overdo it. Oh yeah. That's nice. I think subconsciously before I was kind of pushing down on it because I didn't want it to lift up. You don't have to do that now. Now you can just kind of walk up and grab it. I'm tempted to go a little more, but I think what I probably ought to do is wait a bit and just come back and see if it loosens up. Yeah, it still feels good. I'm going to leave it there. Guys, as always, thanks for hanging out with me for this week's design and video. It took us a couple different iterations to get there, but I am really happy with the end result. And yeah, I probably overcomplicated a bit more than I need to. Was the set screw necessary? I don't know, probably not, but it certainly doesn't hurt anything, and I think it is going to turn this into a much more long-lasting repair with the ability to sort of adjust this as either the inside of our knob wears or the actual shaft that sticks out of that timer gets some wear. I'll look at whatever the model number for this GE dryer is, and I'll make sure that gets down in the description of this video. So if you got to this video looking for a replacement knob and you've got a 3D printer, you'll be able to download this from my site, fpfdesigns.com, and that'll be linked down in the description as well. And of course, the STLs are free. All of the things that I design and feature on this channel, I give away all the STLs for free, as long as they're, not for commercial use. If this is your first time here, this is all we do on this channel. It's all functional parts. This is not a trinket of the week channel. I do a lot of stuff out in my shop, but we also do stuff here around the house and stuff out in the yard as well. So if you're into that, check out some of my other videos. And if you like what you see, I'll see you next Friday.